Welcome back, you beautiful people, to the Real Collective podcast. As always, joined by my illustrious host, Kyle Miller. I am Sean Tassi. I've been listening to a lot of Eminem recently with that new album release, so I'm feeling myself. I'm feeling a little bit silly, a little bit, in your face. As always, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who you think might like this conversation. I'm going back through the whole discography, and man, there are some real bangers that you forgot about in there. I don't know if you grew up. We all grew up on Eminem, right? Maybe not.
Oh yeah, I was more of a punk rock genre, but respect the Eminem stuff for sure, for
Fair.
sure.
Yeah, no.
It's funny. My daughter's one of her best friends is just like, oh my god, Eminem's so good. I can't believe you guys don't know who he is. It's like, no, we way know who he is. You just found out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Go back and look at his old stuff and then
Yeah,
cancel him.
yeah.
It's something. You can also download the buyer guide below, the seller guide below. You can book an appointment with Kyle or I on the Calendly links below. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, thank you for your ears. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for your eyes. And yeah, it's something. It certainly is something. And it's been, what do they say? Spanned over 4 different decades, I think. 90s, aughts, teens, and 20s. That's
Yeah, I
the
guess that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, that's a long span. And you know what's important when you're going for a long span? Making sure that you set yourself up for success. This is my segue. I hope you like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the segue has arrived.
I
Look
showed up
at that.
leaning just a little bit forward, and
Yeah.
here I come to a stop by standing up straight. It is talking about real estate and using it as a vehicle to build generational wealth, to set yourself and your kids up for success. Because right now, no one can buy a house. Our kids will not be able to buy a house. It's going to be too expensive. So, what do we do as parents of young kids right now? How do we set them up for success and set ourselves up for long-term success? What can we do today so that it's going to benefit them down the road? Because that's what being a parent's all about. Um, you were reading an article a minute ago, which sort of stimulated this conversation, talking about gifted down payments are more prevalent now than they ever have been. Right?
Yeah, and it's very logical. And now I'm gonna say this on a couple of I'm gonna probably talk out of both sides of my mouth here. But on one hand, yeah, gifts are massive. And again, I always take articles that I get specifically through our industry, writings with a grain of salt because they're heavily centered around GTA and the GVA. Everything is because those two markets alone skew a bunch of numbers, right? 100%. However, they're obviously impactful markets. People live there. A lot of people live there. A lot of people go there. And if you can't get into those markets, like the trickle down starts to happen, right? So of course people need gifts more than ever because our system isn't set up to handle properties over $1 million. And by system, I mean if you look at specifically first time buyers that have less than 20% down, they can't buy over 1 million. And it's not like they can't afford it. That's a thing. Don't get me wrong. But it really is no, CMHC, the default insurers will not insure deals over $1 million, right? And so people can grasp that. If you did the way it works, again, quick recap, if you're going to put down less than 20%, first of all, the price has to be below 1 million. Now let's just say 1 million was okay and they would insure it. Your down payment would basically have to be 90 grand, 25,000, 40, 75 grand, 75 grand on that $1 million property. Now that they won't do that, it's $200,000 minimum. So like that's $125,000 for those keeping score at home. That's a massive amount of money. 75 grand's a lot of money, but 200,000 is even obviously much more.
Man,
You were saying
5 or 10 grand's a lot of money. I don't have
it's
that.
all a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's all a lot of money. but it's just there's the vast majority, right, of people don't just roll in with 200 grand, especially if they haven't owned in the last 10 years, like if they're brand new to this, right? So that's the thing. So and there's no alternative.
Right.
You either at a million plus, right? At a million plus, you put down $200,000 or you don't buy. End of story. And someone will say, "Well, we can." No, you can't. I'll shut you down. No, you can't. There is no alternative. Private lenders, most of them will not go past 80% loan to value these days. Most of them are looking for 75, meaning they want you to come to the table with 25% down and still have all their fees and stuff on top of that. So there's nobody that can do this. The only people that can are people with equity, and a lot of those people are our parents. They have the equity, right? Now in Ottawa, I also will say this: I have never seen so many people come to me with the amount of money they have for down payment, like the sheer amount. And that's because, and it's, that is a sign too of they're older, right? They're not old. They're younger than me, but they're older. They're not 21, 22 in most cases. They've been living at home and grinding away in mom and dad's basement, right? Or in a small rental or something like that, just socking money away because they knew they needed it.
Yeah.
And that's the sign. That's another different way of doing a gift. But of course they have to have it because there's just the numbers say they do. Although I will say, right, like if you can figure it out, I'm literally doing a deal right now with a young gentleman. He's 23 years old. He's dropping 100 grand on his house, and that's it. Again, shout out to the trade guys. Don't buy the big truck. Don't buy the four-wheeler. Now I'm talking to my son, who's a trade guy. But I'm like, you too can start early because we've already planned it out. We were having a chat the other day, and he's like, was the rental game good or should we do that? I'm like, dude. He's like, someday I want to build a house. I'm like, this is how you do it. Buy this one, you do this. In 10 years, you'll be here. Then you do that with the second. Boom, boom, boom. You bought that one. You're 43 years old in 20 years. That new build is paid off, and the other two are done in rock and roll. And he was just like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, man, like you're starting with time. You have money and you have time. You are good to go.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was a little sidebar. But yeah, of course we need gifts. Of course.
Well, and so the next part of the conversation is that the idea of gifting money to your kids after you already have built your big nest egg might not be the exact best way to go about doing it because it's going to impact your life when you're, 60, 70 years old a lot more than it would, like you said, money and time. If you're able to do it sooner, maybe you're not gifting it directly to your kids, but maybe you're buying a property, an investment property, a rental property in their name, right? Maybe there's a different way to do it where, uh, you know, let's say you've got negative cash flow of $200 or $300 a month, but you don't have to go and put a mortgage on your house at 65 or 70 years old to be able to gift your kids down payment. You get to take advantage of the time, right?
100%. I've got numbers that'll show, right, RRSP, RESP investments versus real estate, right? And by no means am I saying you can only do one thing. There's one thing I hate about the internet. It's that people just get on here and like, you should, and if you don't, you're dumb. No, like millions of people have built wealth in a thousand different ways, right? Dave Ramsey works, Robert Kiyosaki works, Grant Cardone works. They all work, guys. Otherwise, they wouldn't be successful.
Yeah.
Pick your lane, but just understand there's different options out there, right? And I've done a webinar on it where I've said, look, we can show you the numbers that say this is how it can work, including paying capital gains tax. You're gonna pay it someday. Just roll over and take it because it's gonna happen. And then, but you can still win at doing that. And it's a different option.
For me, the easiest way to understand it is to say when you're buying real estate, you are putting 20% down. So you're going to buy, let's call it a $500,000 thing, and you're only putting $100,000 of your own money. If you put $100,000 into the stock market, and let's say the stock market goes up by 10% over a certain amount of time, you now have $110,000 for your $100,000 investment. Great. But if you do the same thing in real estate and the real estate market goes up by 10%, your $100,000 is now turned into $150,000. So because of your ability to borrow the rest of the money from the bank, you are 5xing your lift essentially. There's no other vehicle that you can use that can do that for you when you're talking about investing. Simple. Like there's unless I'm wrong, if there is something, write it down in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm okay to be wrong. Are there risks? Yes, there's risks. Are there shit tenants? Yes, there's shit tenants. Is the landlord tenant board so heavily favoring the tenants as opposed to the landlord? Yes, all of those things are true. But the more important thing that's true is that you can't find any other vehicle that gives you a 5x on your money instantly. Now, well, what if the house prices don't go up? Man, if the house prices don't go up, what are the mutual fund prices doing, or the stock market prices? Oh, well, I have this one friend who bought a stock and it quadrupled in 3 days. Okay, well, good. Is it going to happen again? No. What's the average growth that we see in houses in Ottawa every year over the last 50 years? Right? There's a long-term thing. We're talking about not investing for yourself. I'm investing for your kids. So what, 5% per year, 6% per year, averaged out over a long, well, we just had a huge spike and then it dropped. Yeah, that's okay. If you're holding long term, these sort of deviations from the normal growth are expected, right? You don't sell or buy stock if you're holding it for a long time. You don't sell or buy your house if you're holding it for a long time. You just ride that wave, and ride it up. That's my
Yeah, and I know there's going to be people out there too who are like, who are, and this is part of the way I think is that because I've talked to a lot of older folks who are trying to do something in that realm, right? And it's I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that our perception as layman's people of wealth and rich, right? Equity being a massive part of that is the fact that you can only realize that if you dump the asset, right? So people who are like, yeah, but I'll have my house and then I can, and then you can what? Right? Because if you sell that house, fine, and you're going to cash out and give your kids money, fine. Like that's a way to do it for sure, especially if it's your primary residence. But I'll warn you, if you think at 65, 67, 70 years old, and you have, and you're on whatever pension or whatever type of savings, and you think you're going to roll into the bank and peacock and say, I have all this money, you guys should just give me a mortgage. I'm the guy that's going to punch you in the face and be like, you don't qualify. You don't qualify. People are like, yeah, but I have all this money. I'm like, do you? They'll discount your RRSPs that you're drawing from by 30% right off the top because you don't do that, right? Like they're going down, right? Certain assets, they don't count as income, right? Like if you can't cash it and get it tomorrow, they're not going to use it, right? And if you're looking at, well, CPP and OAS, one, will it even be around? And two, right? If you make $27,000 a year for CPP and OAS or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't qualify for anything at today's rates. I'm sorry to tell you. And people who are like, well, I have, net worth. Okay. You want to go and buy a house as a net worth deal? Most banks won't even talk to you without dumping 35 to 50% down payment on that thing. I'm just telling you right now. So there's no 5% down net worth deal. And so all these things that we have in our heads of how rich we are, the bank doesn't care most of the time.
It's funny. I was watching a thing and it was talking about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And rich people look like they've got all of these things, right? Houses and cars and boats, and blah 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 blah. Wealthy people, you can't pick them out. There's nothing that looks anything special about them. And instead of spending their money on things, they keep their money and they buy investment properties, or they put it in, savings or whatever, and they build wealth by not spending, as opposed to people who are rich are spending their money on things that look outwardly a certain way. And so it's like, how do you, if if you want to see someone who's really ripped, you can just look at them and say, hey, this guy goes to the gym, I want to copy what he's doing physically. If you want to see someone who you want to copy what they're doing financially, hard to pick them out, right? You really have to get to know someone to understand how they're built up. And a lot of people keep that stuff pretty hush hush. So, if you're looking for good role models, it's kind of hard to find sometimes. So it's interesting to talk about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. I think this is what we're talking about today is a move of a wealthy person, not necessarily a rich person. Anyways, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some stories where we've had some clients who have done this and how it's been successful for them. On the flip side, as always, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share with someone who you think might like this conversation, and we'll catch you on the flipper. This episode of the Real Collective podcast is brought to you by Real Collective Marketing, the marketing agency that specializes in the unique needs and budgets of small to medium-sized businesses. We provide turnkey marketing solutions that get results. We become an extension of your team and act as your virtual marketing department, designing and implementing cost-effective strategies that will help grow your business. You can find out more today at www.realcollectivemarketing.ca. Now, here's your hosts, Sean and Kyle. Welcome back, you beautiful people, to the second half of the Real Collective podcast. I hope you enjoyed that beautiful information advertorial from Real Collective Marketing Agency, the top-notch marketing agency for the Real Collective and realtors across the city. As always, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who you think might like this conversation. You can also download us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. And you can put us into your rotation very easily by clicking that button. Which button? I don't know. You can figure it out. It's pretty straightforward. Download the buy or sell.
Button. The button.
Point to a corner. Yeah. And all that good stuff. You can also book an appointment with Kyle or I with the Calendly links below. Let's talk about story time. Kyle, you got a good one.
Yeah, we were talking about just the wealth and stuff. And again, I have this young lad who's, say young lad because he's younger than me, but he's buying his first home. And it's a great starter home for him. And he's going to be able to leverage that for a long, long time. Right. And it's great. And I think back to earlier on in my career, and it's interesting just how all stuff comes back. But this young couple and, again, living at home with mom and dad, hustling, doing their best. And again, times were different. So let's perspective is a thing. Is it tougher to buy a property now? Yes. Is it tougher to buy a rental? 100% it is. But it's still a thing, and time will work itself out most likely. At least that's my belief. So this couple scraped together, bought themselves a little bungalow here in Orleans. Immediately started renovating it to get someone renting into the basement. And they split that and they lived there, and that was their sacrifice. They had someone living below them, and within a couple years they refinanced it, took some extra money out. They had been saving because the amount of rent they were getting was literally paying for the entire thing. Those were the days, but paying for the entire thing. So they were able to save paychecks plus build the equity. They refinanced. They went and bought another one that was a duplex this time, and again lived with other people. They lived in one side, had someone else living in the other. And then this is year 2, or maybe year 3. Yeah, it was probably 2 years later they did that. They were in that one for a little bit, ended up refinancing both of them again, bought one that was a heavy project. And we actually, on that one, the house was in such a state that and then just the way rental income works, right? It was tougher. But they actually took a bigger chance, and we went with a private lender to get that one done, because they could work on it on their own time and whatever. Did that for a year, and then and then had that one, and that's kind of where they live now. And essentially, and then he was looking to change careers. And I was just talking to him about 2 weeks ago because he was like, "Yeah, we're coming up for maturity, but I'm kind of in between jobs, and I'm just about here, but I'm on a contract." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're not sign back, take this type of deal, sign back, and just we'll touch on this when you're more stable." And I'm like, "But what have you been living on?" And he's like, "Oh, 100%. We just cashed out." He's like, "We cashed out both rentals, sold them in the peak, took a massive amount of money, paid down this one a little bit more, been living off the savings, and still have a bunch left. So we'll be able to buy something else when I'm back at work. But for now, yeah, it's just cool." Like and again, he was at the right time on the uptick for sure. But it's like, but he didn't do that overnight. This has been, he was early in my career when I was still part time, and I've watched him do this all the way. So this has been a 10-year, yeah, roughly I'd say about a 10-year project for where they are. And it was phenomenal. Another client, same thing. He bought $1 million property and has a $400,000 mortgage because he ended up just cashing out 2 or 3 rentals and was like, "I just want one. I'm done with this." But he ran it for 10 years or so, and now lives in the house he wants at the price he got it, right in the right spot, has a nice little rental that rents beautifully, and he's like, "This is the life."
There you go.
So it's like it can happen. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes some planning. It takes some vision. But they both those guys have set themselves up. They're fine. If that second client, if he said, "I just don't want to have a mortgage anymore, forget this," he could sell that other property, pay the capital gains, cry a little bit, and then sit in his mortgage-free home crying about capital gains tax. Mortgage-free though. So
Yeah. I would yeah, I'm certainly not mortgage free. I would say what I'm seeing a lot of people doing now is, even if they haven't been through that process that you've described, is they're sitting in their house that they've been in for 5 something years, and they're saying, "Hey, I'm sitting on this equity in my house. It's worth whatever, $1 million. I bought it for, pre-pandemic, I don't know, 500, let's say, for example. I'm sitting on 600K of equity, right?" They take that equity out of their house, and instead of taking it out when they're 70 years old or 65 years old or whatever, when they don't have an income to borrow money against their house to loan it to their kids, they're taking it out now and buying the house, a rental property, in their kids' names, right? And so it's like, hey, they're doing it now instead of doing it 15 years in the future, and they're going to get all of the benefit of time. They're going to get the 5x benefit that we were talking about in terms of investment. And then they're going to get the benefit of another 5 or 10 years of growth, or 15 or 20 years, depending how early you do it, how old your kids are, of growth of the marketplace. And if it's going up 5% per year, it'll double in, what is that, 10 years, give or take? 12 years, something like that.
yeah, and there's different ways, there's different thought processes and stuff to on ways to do it. There's different programs, not programs, but there's different strategies to use to take advantage of this stuff, right? In terms of just how to do your taxes.
Yeah.
Just like that alone can shave years off your mortgage, right? And it's different, and it's different thought processes of, do you actually need to pay some of this stuff off? Like that's one of my thoughts. This is a totally personal thing,
Sure.
right? Is, do I actually need to pay that other property off? Right? The longer there's debt against it, the more tax advantages I have. And as a self-employed person, I'm always looking for those things. And and if I can take that money from over there and dump it in my principal residence over here, then I'll be mortgage free. And okay, maybe I still have to pay on something over there, but okay, like there's just different thought processes there, and it's different visions of success that people have when it comes to real estate, where it's like, do yourself the favor and look into it. That's all I'm saying. do yourself the favor and look into it. What if there's a strategy that works for you? What if?
I
And
heard,
like,
I heard this strategy that a lot of people I think are sleeping on, and it makes a lot of sense, especially when you start to talk about taxation. Because if you take all of your money and pay off your rental properties, you have to pay tax on the income that you're getting from the rental properties. So another real estate agent, this is going back maybe 5 or 10 years ago, said to me, here's my plan. I'm going to go and I'm going to buy 10 rental properties over the course of 10 years, one a year. Okay, cool. And those rental properties, when I buy them today versus, in 5 or 10 years down the road, are going to be worth whatever. And he says, if I buy one every year, that by the end of the 10th year, I'll have to refinance the one that I bought in the first year and the one that I bought in the sixth year. And I'll refinance both of those and I'll pull 200K out after refinancing. And yes, my payments will be higher, but theoretically by then the rents will be higher as well. So I'll pull 200K out. And when I'm pulling that money out, I'm getting that money tax free. And so I want to own these 10 properties. And every year I want to go in, I want to pull 200K tax-free money at the beginning of the year, whenever my mortgage is due. I want to pull that money out, and that's my money to live on. That's my retirement. I have $200,000 tax-free money. Now you got to get there, right? You have to go and buy a property every year. Not everybody's in the position where they can go and buy a property every year. It's a big deal, but the idea is not to pay down the mortgage as quickly as you can and live on the rental income. The idea is to continue to mortgage those properties as long as you can so that they're maximized and the rental income is offset by the amount that you're paying in the mortgage. Because then you're not paying tax on the rental income because you're writing it down as hey, here's my expense, here's my income, and they match. They're equal. And then you just live off the $200,000 tax-free money every year.
and I think there's holes in that, quite honestly.
Sure,
But
I'm sure there are, but it
there's,
seems
yeah,
in quick viewing, it's like, oh, that's perfect.
I think you could do that if you had lines of credit on them. Because again, the first question I go to is the finance guys, what are you doing for work? Because if someone's going to sit there and just be like, no, I just live off the rental income. Okay, I'm here to tell you that's going to be very difficult to refinance your properties every couple of years, because it gets very delicate with how that works, right? The layman person who's like, well, all this rental income, the bank doesn't see that. It's never dollar for dollar, right? No, I'm just poking holes in this guy's thing. I'm not saying it won't work. There's ways to set it up, I'm sure. But again, it's like, okay, run that strategy, dude. Because you know what the worst part about that strategy is? If it doesn't work, you know what the worst part is? You're going to sell houses,
Yeah.
and you're guaranteed to have 20% equity in it. You're guaranteed to have 20% equity in it. So the worst case scenario is you sell them and have to pay some tax.
Sure.
This is me feeling bad for you, just so we're clear. Like, you know what I mean? It's just there's just different ways to do it. People are gonna jump on this and hate it, and it's like, yeah, cool, whatever. Like, do what you do. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, hit us up in the comments. Tell us how wrong we are. That's okay. And if you've got the better solution, then by all means, we're happy to hear it. We work, I think, between the two of us, we work with a bunch of different investors, people who have different strategies, different ideas, different techniques. We've got people who are building secondary dwelling units. We've got people who are building ADUs, which are coach houses and stuff like that. We've got people who are taking Bill 23 and stretching a house into 3 separate units. We've got people who are doing all these different things. So yeah, we get a front row seat to it. So.
And I think the best part of that, what you just said, is the fact that I personally would be able to love to sit down with someone who comes with an open mind and is like, I want to do this, but here's my roadblock. So someone says, I want to buy a rental. Say, great. And they're going to say, but every time I run the numbers on a single family unit, I never see any money made. You're right. But if we get the right one and you put a secondary dwelling in it, now you're going to make enough money and the value is going to go up. Ooh, interesting. we have that. Yep, I can pull that. I can cherry pick that from here. And then cherry pick this from here, and then we can do right. And then you're like, well, I want to be like that guy who just pulls money out of his houses. Great. Let's put it. Let's do your this with your SDU, and we'll put a line of credit on it. So now you can put money with a line of credit, tax free. Other people are paying it down, and you get to do that every year. Ooh, that was strategy 1, 2, and 3 all rolled into one, right? Like you can so pick all that when you work with the right people.
Yeah.
If you just talk to the guy who's like, I only do this and I only see it this way, guess what way you're going to have to go?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good. It's good to have all the different strategies, and that's exactly why you need to click on the link below and schedule an appointment with Kyler. I have a Calendly link. This is what we do, right? You can also download us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much for your eyeballs. And remember, like, share, and what else do you do? Subscribe to the channel. Those are all the things. And you can also download the buyer seller guides below. Go. You got one last thing? I feel like you
No,
want.
that was just a deep breath. I got excited there.
I'm
Sorry.
excited. Ah!
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. You're getting ready. You're getting so ready to say collective. Until next
That's it. Yeah.
keep it real.
Collective.